If you've had a dog, you'll know the meaning of unconditional love. If you've had a cat, you know who the boss is. In both those cases, you'll probably agree when people say that having a pet is like having a child. But if you've never had a pet, and if that's something that you're considering, have you thought of all of the implications of bringing one home? If you're on the fence, or if the idea of owning a pet has been rumbling around in the back of your mind, then this conversation will help you make the right decision. This is Big Decisions on NDTV Profit, and I'm Alex Matthew. Before we jump into this conversation though, you've heard of German Shepherds and Siberian Huskies and Persian cats. But do you know much about the Indian breeds of cats and dogs? Animals that are endemic to India? Yukta joins in to tell you a little more.
A recent survey by the Pet Adoption Foundation reveals that 70% of those who adopt pets prefer foreign breeds. But why are Indian breeds so often overlooked? Indies are the most well suited to our climate, so here's a list of native breeds that you can look out for when you consider bringing a pet home. The Indian Pariah dog is resilient and adaptable, while the Indian Spitz has a charming fluffy coat. Let's not forget the Mudhol Hound, which is sleek and agile. The Rajpalyam dog is known for its striking white coat, while the Rampur Greyhound is graceful and fast. More of a cat person? Don't worry. The Indian Billy is adaptable, quick, and has a short coat, while the Spotted Cat and Jungle Cat are also standout choices. Research indicates that adoption rates for these native breeds are relatively low. A 2022 study by the Indian Veterinary Association found that only 15% of urban pet adoptions were for Indian breeds, compared to 60% for foreign breeds. Additionally, the Animal Welfare Board of India reported in 2023 that awareness about these breeds is limited, with only 22% of potential pet owners considering them. A 2024 report by the Pet Adoption and Welfare Network indicated that while overall pet ownership in India is rising, adoption rates remain low, with only 25% of pets being adopted from shelters. But why shop when you can adopt, especially for these wonderful native breeds? So next time you're looking for a new furry friend, think local.
My guests today are Dr. Vrushali Jadhav and Harshvardhan Roongta. Thank you so much to the both of you for taking the time today, and it's going to be an educative conversation, I think, for all of us.
Hi.
So I want to start, and Harsh, let me say at the onset, you don't have a pet. I checked with you before we started this conversation. So if you've got questions for the doctor, then please do ask.
Most certainly, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so let's start with the first question, which is, what are the kinds of dogs and cats, and assuming that these are the small animals that you would normally have in a city,
Right.
Or otherwise, so what do you need to bear in mind when you are deciding to go out and get one?
So I believe one should really understand the space that they have at home and research about the breeds that they want to get. So if you have a small house with a one-room kitchen, I would want you to think twice while getting a 70-kilo dog. Like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That breaks into animal welfare, and you're being mean in a way. So just try and not do that. Think of something which is 4-kilo dogs, 5-kilo dogs, or maybe get a cat. So something that fits in your space and you can accommodate them well, because right now they are small, they are puppies, but once they get bigger, they are going to grow in size, and that time leaving them off
Is going to be problematic.
Yes.
So, so therefore, the space is the first and foremost concern,
Yes.
right?
Space,
Climate is also a
breed.
factor.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're living in a place like Mumbai where it is hot and humid, you should think twice before getting a breed like a Siberian, because they do need colder climates. They are born for those things. So when you're bringing them in your household, you're actually again compromising their lifestyle, and thereby it does cause them to have troubles. They get a lot of skin issues, they get respiratory issues. So it can be all avoided if you just make the right choice.
And there is a financial implication there as well, Harsh, because I've seen people bring in furry dogs and animals and they ultimately have to have the AC on at all points of time.
That's true.
It's not something that they factored in when they consider getting an animal or getting a pet. It's like having a family member ultimately. Is that something that you've considered?
Yeah, so actually, right. So Alex, if you're planning to get a living being, so a pet is also a living being, right? So as you would introduce a child to your family, the same way you have to treat your pet if you're choosing to be a pet parent, right? So if you're getting a living being to your house, please make sure that you have enough financial resources for the food and shelter. I mean, of course, clothing is not what we're talking about, but food, clothing, shelter. You need to ensure that you
Clothing is optional.
Clothing is optional, and it could be probably some fancy dress kind of a competition that they participate in. But nevertheless, you need to ensure that you are financially capable to do justice to that living being that you're getting in your house. It could be a dog or a cat, or it could be any other pet for that matter. Why? Because it's a responsibility, right? As I said, I keep using the word living being. So it's a living being. So you need to ensure that justice has been done and adequately provided for. And if you're just doing it for the sake of doing something, then I feel that you should avoid, playing with somebody's life for that matter. And it is a financial commitment.
Okay, let's talk about breeds, right? And we have had a bit of an idea of Indian breeds. We'll get to that in just a bit. Availability and how easy it is to get one.
Yes.
But talk about the common breeds of dogs and cats, and which regions, like for example, if you were to talk about cooler areas, if you talk about places like Mumbai, places like Delhi, where you would get a pet, talk about the breeds that would be more appropriate for those regions.
Okay, so in Mumbai and Delhi, I have seen that the houses are mostly in apartment styles. So you don't have big bungalows with good big yards. So probably choosing dogs like apartment dogs like Shih Tzus or Pomeranians, Spitz, Indian Spitz, all these do really well and they get their quota of activity. Whereas if you see dogs like a Doberman or a German Shepherd, these are good if you have a farm. Like these are farmhouse dogs. You just leave them on the open land and they're going to run and they're going to get their exercise and they'll be happy.
Labradors?
Labradors also are big, and when we keep them in an apartment, again, I've seen a lot of people actually coming to me and saying that, ma'am, we want to walk. The dog is obese, okay, and we want to walk him, but in Mumbai we just don't know where to walk him because everything is under construction. So people are finding it difficult to walk their animals. And if walking is such a problem, then what about their exercise? What about their running around? Because all the dogs have a tendency to go and fetch and they just like doing retrieving things.
And what about dogs like, okay, so you're talking about retrievers, but what about dogs like spaniels, cocker spaniels? They're pretty popular as well.
They are good. They are good. Cocker spaniels are a good breed again for apartment style of living.
What about cats? We've not spoken about cats.
Cats are good. You need to know that there's a difference between a cat and a dog.
The cat chooses you.
Yes. So I believe that once you understand what your cat is like, then you're never going to go back to a dog because they are so different, but both are grateful in their own ways. A dog is always going to consume a lot of your space, whereas a cat will not do that. They are more solitary in nature and they like being left by themselves. So if you are someone who works a lot and cannot be home for most part of your day, then maybe consider getting a cat because they need lesser attention, I would say. That's not true for all cats, but in general.
Okay, very quickly before we jump to Harsh again, the cost is something that we need to discuss because the options available is, and a lot of people are now talking about it, is that you should perhaps go and consider adopting. But then if you are buying, what are the kind of ranges that we're talking about?
So it totally depends on the breed of the dog that you're looking into. If you buy something that is small, let's say an Indian Spitz, a puppy should cost you around 5 to 10,000 rupees. And this I'm talking from good reputed breeders who can provide some paperwork. If you try to get labs, if you try to get cocker spaniels, if you try to get shih tzus, these will cost anywhere from 20 to 25,000. They can go even higher. There is a thing that goes on nowadays in the industry that if you want the papers, like if you want a puppy with the papers, that means that you need to pay a certain amount extra, which should not be the case, but it is.
Okay. We have to yet talk about the implications of bringing a pet home in terms of the general cost. But this initial amount, is that something that you can plan for? Is this more or less something that it's not very expensive. Of course, it can get very expensive, but here we're talking about 10,000 to 25,000 to 30,000 rupees. It's not something that really you need to plan for, right?
So, well, Alex, at this point in time, in the current situations that we live in, I think all those aspiring to own a pet would be able to spend about 25,000.
Yeah.
So there's no need to make a special plan towards it, right? What is a bigger issue is a regular cost of maintaining that pet. Right, because it's a regular expense in terms of as I said, the food, shelter that you provide, in terms of some medical attention that the pet will require, in terms of the grooming that a pet requires on a monthly basis. So those are going to be regular committed expenses that you need to provide for. So you have to make sure that you have the financial resources. Well, there are certain insurances now. I mean, they're still at the nascent stage too.
Yeah.
But there are insurance companies who are planning to introduce this pet insurance.
We will in fact come to that in a bit, because that, I think, ultimately is a very important part of the financial aspect of owning a pet. Right. But the cost of upkeep, and who better to ask than a vet, right? You know about the medical costs. What absolutely do you need to set aside?
So now again, I will go back to my patients. I have seen a lot of first puppy consults where the pet parents walk in with a small puppy and an entire bag full of products that the breeder has asked them to buy, or the person who is selling the puppy has asked them to buy, which are kind of unnecessary. Your dog does not need calcium supplements. They just need good food, and they don't need a lot of multivitamins. Again, just give good food and everything will be fine. So I feel that as soon as you get a dog, rather than buying anything, just see your vet first. I think that first consult is going to walk you through a lot on what to expect, when to expect, what the next few months are going to look like when the dog is just going to pop. Suddenly, within 6 months, first you have
They're going to grow very big.
Yes. It's like a 1 kilo puppy, and within 6 months, like, bam, you're 25 kilos. It's so rapid change. It's a rapid growth spurt that they get, and how to prepare for it. I think a vet is the first person who can tell you and guide you through all of this.
Okay, so but let's talk about ranges, right? If you're talking about a 4 kg dog or a small cat,
right.
If you're going up to a 25 kg dog, as you've pointed out, 70 kg, does that exist?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we'll call that an exception to the rule. But on an average, what are you spending?
So when you get the dog, you have to first look at the food. The food costs also change depending on the weight of the dog. So the smaller the dog, it's a bit cheaper. But when you go higher, of course, the quantity that is required also changes. Sure. Any normal food bag, if you say like a subpar brand, then it will be around 500 to 600 for a 2 kilo, 3 kilo bag. But if you get into the nicer brands, which are well known and they are not Indian made, they come from abroad, they're sourced from abroad. Those bags can be anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 for a 2 kilo bag.
And how many of those do you need?
Again, depends on the breed, but it can go from a few hundred grams to like 800 grams or so.
Per serving?
Per serving. No, it's a 24-hour ration.
So let's sum this up. We're talking about, for a big dog, 2,000 rupees per month for food and 15,000 rupees in the first 6 months or thereabouts for your medical facilities.
Right.
So within the first year itself, you're talking about 24,000 rupees for food and 15,000. It's quite a cost. And you're talking about 30,000 rupees for the dog. You're talking about close to a lakh within the first year itself. And for a smaller dog, perhaps you can talk about 80% or 75% of that.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the implications of that, because it's not a small cost, and how do you bear that in mind. We have to slip into a very quick break. We'll be back on the other side to talk about how you should plan for this financially. Welcome back. This is Big Decisions, and we're talking about what you need to bear in mind when you decide to have a pet at home. And we've talked about the fact that it could well cost close to a lakh of rupees within the first year itself. And we're talking about a significant cost over the course of the next several years. So therefore, the question to you, Harsh, it's not a small amount of money, to say the very least. And we're talking about regular upkeep and ensuring that the living being that you said is It's so important, right? It's a responsibility. How do you budget for this on an ongoing basis?
So, Alex, what I gather with what Dr. Vrishali has also said, there's a cost of acquisition which could be approximately 25 to 30,000. Of course, you're not talking about exotic breeds and all that bit. So, on an average, if that's your cost, so I'm sure that we can, in current times, anybody aspiring to own a pet would have that kind of resources available. What they need to be mindful about is the regular incurring cost that we're going to have. So, which is approximately, say, about 5 to 10,000 rupees on an average.
Yeah, on a monthly basis.
On a monthly basis. This is keeping in mind only the food, shelter, and regular upkeep.
Yeah.
We also need to be prepared if there is any medical emergency required. If there is a theft or your pet straying away, if there's a third-party liability, what if your pet goes and bites somebody else?
Oh, let's hope that doesn't
So there
happen.
could be a liability on you because of that as well. So there are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind. So one is to be mentally and emotionally prepared to have another living being in your family. The other is financial element. So all in all, I would suggest that if you're planning to have a pet, besides the acquisition cost, keep a provision of approximately 10 to 20,000 rupees every month. If you believe that you can afford that kind of money, only then should you get a pet. After you have a pet, of course, what you need to take care of is the regular expenses. You're going to be emotionally invested into the pet as well. So you need to manage yourself around there.
Yeah.
You cannot at a point say that, look, I'm facing problems. I could possibly be given a pink slip. I'm so sorry. You just abandon the pet. That should not be the intent.
Yeah.
So you need to provide that, you need to have enough provisions. There is insurance available for pets. Besides that, even if you have an insurance that you buy, because that covers a whole lot of things, but it's still in a nascent stage.
Where can you buy it from?
So there are insurance companies, general insurance companies, which are offering this pet insurance.
And what are the kind of premium?
So premium would depend entirely on the breed and on the sum insured. It's, as I said, it's a product in its nascent stages, not very popular yet. Not all insurance companies offer it. So it's going to be a trial and error even for the person who takes it. So the coverage is quite interesting, though. I was going through the details of pet insurance. So you will find surgical benefits being paid for, hospitalization.
Surgical, okay.
So I'll just enumerate a few things which are very interesting. So basically, it takes care of the bigger costs that you may look at. So one is a surgery. If your pet has to undergo certain surgeries, if there's an hospitalization of the pet, if there's an OPD treatment, if there is a terminal disease that your pet has been diagnosed of, if there is a mortality benefit as well if the dog or your pet passes away, there's a third-party liability as I spoke about. So there are a whole host of things that are covered. The sum insured is different because surgery benefit will be capped at a certain point for a particular breed of a pet. There would be hospitalization which is capped. The third-party liability could go up to even 10 to 15 lakhs because that could be your liability if at all your pet goes and causes harm to some other person.
Yes.
So, and then there is a benefit which also covers your pet being stolen or lost or just straying away. So these benefits are included.
Based on the measurement that we've done, we're talking about what, 1,20,000, 1,00,000 or thereabouts, and that should cover more or less everything. I think when you're saying 10,000 rupees per month, that should cover an insurance as well.
Absolutely. So when I, just taking a rough estimate, because, everything depends on the breed of the pet that you're getting, of a dog or a cat. So it lots depends on, it's so variable. I mean, you cannot generalize and get one figure out. Yeah. But in case we take an average.
Yeah, which is what I'm looking for.
Average household buying a pet. Not exotic ones, not those Arabs sitting with two large lions around you, not those kind of images. Okay, if you're talking about a normal household buying pets, okay, so I think an estimation of approximately 10,000 rupees that you allocate towards the benefit of the pet per month should be, I think, a decent to begin with, and then I guess you should take references from your friends who already own pets. They'll be in a better position to give you an actual cost for the same breed, cat or a dog, with those variables in mind.
Now, the other aspect is, now that you know that you need 10,000 rupees per month for a good, we're talking about 10, 15 years in certain situations. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm right. I know that I'm right in this case. But you're talking about a significant expense over the course of the lifetime of your dog or cat. Do you set aside a fund for this? Is there a pet fund that you would recommend?
So given the popularity and given the escalation in cost, so as you said, it is only, we're not looking at only 5, 10 or 15 years because once you have a pet, invariably you will have a pet for the rest of your life. Sure. Because I've seen people getting so emotionally invested into the pet that if somebody's pet has passed away, I see them having the same kind of pain as if a family member is not there.
No doubt.
And they immediately replace that pet with another one to, come back to it. So I guess once you have a pet, you will not ever have, never not have a pet, kind of a situation. So it's a lifelong expense. I mean, you would continue to have that member with you. And with escalation in costs, which is inflation, even it applies to pet food, treatment, etc., you would need to start providing for it, because you don't want a situation, as I said, to come to a point where you cannot keep a pet because of monetary constraints. You would not want to just simply abandon the pet at one point in time saying that, look, I've lost my job.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to do that.
That's not an option.
So at that point in time, when you're in distress, probably you would want that pet to be around you. I mean, I think that's exactly what, COVID taught us this, and people went and adopted pets during COVID because they were feeling alone and, all those kind of things. And of course, it reversed post-COVID. But anyways, so coming to a point where at any point in time you're not feeling good, the last thing you would want to do is abandon your pet at that point.
No doubt.
So yes, it's a regular expense. And if possible, and if you plan to continue to own a pet all your life, why not create a fund for it? It's not too expensive in any case.
What kind of instruments would you put it in?
So again, the same old stuff. See, you need to make sure that you have money.
Yeah.
The growth is not the criteria.
Yeah.
You don't really want your money to beat inflation by, say, 600 basis points.
Which is why I asked.
Yeah. So you have to understand the intent of creating that capital. The intent is what? Do you really want to make money out of this investment? No. You just want to ensure that at all points in time, I have enough money, whether or not I have a job or whatever problems otherwise I'm facing. I need to have money so that the food, shelter, and regular upkeep and well-being is taken care of.
So like a debt fund or something like that?
It could be a debt fund. It could be anything for that matter. I mean,
or a bank deposit.
It could be a bank deposit or anything. I mean, just need to ensure that the objective is not returns maximization.
Yeah.
The objective is to have money. The well-being of the pet is taken care of.
Okay. So assume that you have the financial wherewithal. Okay. Now we've established that is a fact. But Harsh made an important point. A lot of people went out during COVID and got pets.
Yeah.
And that reversed at the end of it when they started going back to work, because it's an investment not just of money, but it's an investment of time.
Yes.
And I think that the second investment is far more crucial to bear in mind.
Right.
In what situations would you say that having a pet is a bad idea? When you say, for example, you're not at home or nobody's at home for 8.5, 9 hours in a day. Is that a big no-no?
No, that's not how I perceive it, because I myself leave my pets at home for over 9 hours.
Dogs and cats?
Yes.
Multiple.
You can never be a vet and not take one dog home, one cat home, just for fostering, just to put it back, nurse it back to health, and then just get attached and keep it.
I'll take your word for it.
It's always that way. But I'm not talking about that short of a time frame. They can be left alone for 9 hours. It's about how you train them into leaving them alone. If you get them into a habit, it's very similar to how you leave your kids. Like if you train them, if you teach them that, okay, listen, I'm going to be at work from this hour to this hour, but I'll come back. I'll be there for you. Or if I'm not there, I'm going to send someone to provide whatever basic food, water, and a walk. If you can provide that much, the pet is going to be okay.
All right. So we've covered quite a few aspects, and I think most importantly, we've covered what you need to know in terms of the financial aspects of it. I'm glad that we've kind of put a ballpark out there. Of course, it would be dependent on where you are living and what breed you have.
Yes.
But we've kind of given people a sense of what they need to bear in mind, what they need to think about. And so perhaps if they've drilled down to a specific breed, then they can go out and ask about.
I would say they need to use Google.
Yeah.
They really need to research their breeds, because the larger breeds can have really expensive emergency surgeries.
Yeah.
And like when I was reading through this insurance, most of these surgeries are not covered.
Yeah.
Like when I was going through those things that they cover, they don't cover any of their electives. We call them electives because they're elective procedures like ovariohysterectomies. We neuter the pets. Those are not covered. They don't cover any dentals. Whereas these are the most common things that you would want.
And the costs of that could go up to?
Depending on the size, it can cost anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact, I had a friend whose pet was going through some medical issues, and they landed up spending about 4 to 5 lakhs.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
Yeah, so it could go into a couple of lakhs, and as Dr. Vrashali has also pointed out, and I have said that pet insurance is at a very nascent stage.
Yeah.
It's going to be more of a trial and error because you've taken the insurance in an estimation that you would be taken care of, and when you land up for the surgery, you're told that this is not covered because even the insurance companies are trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not their fault. There's not enough of data point. It's not a very popular product.
Sure.
So pricing, everything depends on a lot of other factors as well.
So it might just make sense for you to set aside that amount. If you're talking about 4 or 5 lakhs, keep that available like a contingency fund or an emergency fund like you keep for yourself. But I think we've covered most of the important aspects, and I'm sure that if my viewers and my listeners have questions, they can write to us, and I'm sure that Dr. Vrushali and Harsh will be happy to take them at some point in the future. Thank you so much to the both of you for taking the time and for speaking to us on big decisions, and thank you so much for listening in. Hopefully this conversation has helped you out. Do stay tuned, lots more coming up on NDTV Profit.